the Idlewild Dress Crochet Along. I'm Jess from Make and Do Crew, and I'm so excited with how far we've come. Today we're going to finish off our dresses or tops by choosing from a few sleeve options and putting a little edging around the neck. But first we're going to discuss how to block your skirt to make sure you're happy with the length. And this part is really important to do, I would say, even with your yarn still attached, because the length is going to increase quite a bit when you block it and open up this lace. So you may decide you want to block it kind of earlier on, even maybe before you've completed all the repeats, just to see if you're liking the length, the blocked length, and if not, then you can always add more rounds with the yarn that's attached and you'll save yourself another end to weave in. So for blocking, if you're using Lion Brand's Beautiful You yarn, like I am in the sample, you're going to want to steam block your garment. If you're using a different yarn with a different fiber content, you can go ahead and block that whatever way is most appropriate for that fiber. Because this is 100% acrylic, we're going to steam block it with an iron and not touch the iron to the yarn, because then the yarn would melt. That's really critical to the whole thing. So I'm going to show you here sort of an example of how I'm going to block this, and obviously I'm not going to be able to actually pin this down because they won't go through this wood table here, but what you're going to want to do is use a T-pin like this and insert it through to the front and the back chain 2 space of the shell. So I'm going to put it in, if this were foam right here, I would dig it in all the way like this, just to pull this little point down a bit and emphasize it in the bottom edge of the dress. So I would put another one right here, like this, going through both the top and bottom layer, and I just pull it down gently like that. Now, speaking of pulling down, this lace can really expand quite a bit when you block it, so you are going to want to just stretch it a bit, but it will also relax as you put your steam over it. You can actually see right here, this section isn't blocked yet, and I went ahead and blocked this section just so you could compare them. Look at the difference there. This is not blocked, and you can see it's kind of compressed like that. This has been blocked, and it's much more open, and it's taking up more space. So that's why I'm saying to go ahead and block it, maybe even before you finish the skirt, so you can make decisions about adjusting the length before you work any extra rounds. Now, once your dress is pinned down, you're going to want to just set your iron to the steamiest setting it has. For me, that is turning it all the way to the hottest setting and then pressing the steam button. And then I would just hover my iron above the yarn by a couple inches, like probably 3 to 4 inches, and just blow steam on it, making sure to get all the sections of the dress. And once I had done the front like that, then I would unpin it, turn it over, pin it again in the same way and do the back. And then what I've noticed is when I do that, there's a little bit of a discrepancy in how flat the sides lay, where there's a crease from folding it. So what I like to do then is just lay it flat the other way, sort of splitting the difference like this, pin it a bit, or even just like sort of spread it out like this, and then make sure to seam that side crease. And once you've done that, you can just sort of lightly steam block the top of the garment as well. This doesn't have as much opening up that it needs to do because it's not lace, but it is nice to just steam it lightly and make sure that your stitches and your seams are looking their best. Now we're going to move on to the sleeve section, and depending on the size you're making, you'll find 2 to 3 sleeve options in the written pattern. One option is just to keep your dress sleeveless, and if you'd like to do that, you can skip ahead to the neck edging section of the video, and there you'll learn the skill of reverse single crochet, which is also known as a crab stitch. Then you can use the same stitch to finish off the armhole edges of your dress. From here, I'm going to show you how to work the cap sleeves, which are included in the adult pattern, and then the flutter sleeve option, which is in both the adult and children's pattern. To begin the cap sleeves, we are going to work another foundation double crochet row. So that is the same thing we did to begin the bodice. And if you need a refresher on that, you can go back to the first video and review it there. Or the other alternative, just like with the bodice, is to work the chain option and then double crochet in each chain to create the correct number of double crochets for row 1. And then once your double crochets are complete, in row 2, we're going to do the exact same thing we did to start the bodice. So that is the same row 2, and that looks like a chain 1 and then a single crochet in the first stitch and then a double crochet in that same stitch and then we'll skip the next double crochet here and then do a single crochet and a double crochet in the next stitch. So this should look really familiar. It's the same thing we did for the entire bodice. So let's work just like that all the way across this row. So that means we'll skip a stitch and then single and double crochet in the next stitch, skip a stitch, single and double in the next stitch. And once we finish with row 2, we're going to work an increase row, and that's because our cap sleeve needs to have a little bit of a curve in it like this so that it folds over your shoulder and makes that cap shape. So I've placed a marker in the middle stitch here, and you can refer to the written pattern to know what stitch you need to place your marker in for your size, but just know that that should be a single crochet. So just to kind of double check your work, that should be a single crochet that's marked. So as long as that's the case, we're ready to move on to row 3, where we're going to increase when we get to the marker. So you may have noticed by now that we're doing the same pattern that we used to work the bodice, where we alternate double crochet rows and then a row of single crochet and double crochets. So now we're on a double crochet row, and I'm guessing you remember this very clearly at this point, but it begins with a chain 3, and then we're going to skip the first stitch there and then double crochet into the next stitch, and each stitch until we get to the marked stitch in the center. And once we've double crocheted all the way to our marked single crochet, we're going to place 3 double crochets in that marked stitch. And that's what's going to create the little curve for our cap sleeve. So I took my marker out because I need to be able to fit 3 double crochets all in that one single crochet stitch. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So now that I have those 3 created, I'm going to place my marker back into the middle double crochet. So that's the second one that we just worked. And that's going to mark the place that we're going to continue to increase for a few more rows. So from here, I need to just double crochet in each stitch until I get to the end of the row. Now to begin row 4, we are due for a single crochet, double crochet row, the one that has a little bit more texture. So to work that, we're going to start it just as we have throughout the pattern with a chain 1 and then a single crochet and a double crochet in the first stitch, and then skipping a stitch and then another single crochet and double crochet in the next stitch. So that's all really familiar, but we're going to work like that until we get to the marked stitch, and then we're going to work another increase. So let's work in the pattern until we get to the marker, and then we'll talk about how to do the increase. Now that I'm approaching the marker here, I've worked a single crochet and a double crochet, and then I'm going to skip the next stitch, and that puts me into the stitch that's right before the marked stitch here. So I'm going to work another single crochet and double crochet there, and then we're going to work the same thing in this marked stitch. So instead of skipping a stitch like we normally would, we're going to take the marker out so we can see what we're doing, not skip a stitch, and then put another one of those single crochet, double crochet little clusters in that stitch. And then once again, we're gonna not skip a stitch and work one more set of single and double crochet. So now what we've done is created 3 stitches in a row that have a single and a double crochet in them. So we're going to put our marker in the single crochet of the middle cluster. So here's the first one here, here's the second one, here's the third one. I'm going to place my stitch marker in that single crochet. And now we can just revert to the regular pattern. So that means I'm going to skip the next double crochet and then single and double in the next stitch. And then I'll skip the next stitch and then single and double in the next stitch. And that's how you can complete the rest of row 4. So from here, we need to work a few more rows, and the first 2 of them are going to work just in the regular pattern. So instead of increasing at all, we're going to just work a regular double crochet row and then a regular row of single and double crochets. And when you're doing that, as you work into the marked stitch, just go ahead and move the marker up as you go. And then after you've worked those 2 rows, you're going to work one more increase row, which is a repeat of row 3. So what that'll look like is you'll double crochet in every stitch to the marker, then you'll place 3 double crochets in the marker, and then double crochet in every stitch after the marker. Once you get to that point, some sizes will fasten off, and then the larger sizes will work a couple more increase rows. So at this point, you know all the skills to crochet the cap part of the sleeve, so you can go ahead and follow the written pattern to work the number of rows for your particular size. Once your cap sleeve is finished, it should have either 7 rows or 9 rows, depending on the size that you're making, and it should have this slight V shape. So this is where all the increases happened, obviously, and we're able to fasten off now, cut our yarn, and pull the loop through. And we're going to work the edging now, the lace part, into the very bottom, so the foundation row, and that is down here. So if you think about it, the way your sleeve is going to look on your dress is actually with this last row that you just worked being closest to the dress. So this is the shoulder here, and then this is going to be the rest of the sleeve that flares out. So now what we need to do is reference the pattern to know what stitch you need to place your stitch marker in the foundation row. It's basically just we need to center our yarn here so that we can work the lace evenly in this groove right here. And so now that I've marked my stitch, let's just get our bearings here. We have the wrong side of the fabric facing up. This is my foundation row right here. So this is the last row that I crocheted of the cap sleeve. And now because I'm right-handed, I need to attach my yarn in the 6th stitch from the marker to the right. If you are left-handed, you'll just count this direction and put it in the 6th stitch over here because you're going to be crocheting in this direction. But because I'm right-handed, I'm going to attach my yarn, counting 6 stitches over here. And then as I've mentioned before, I like to just attach my yarn with a slip knot on my hook, insert it, and pull it through. And once our yarn is attached, we can begin with row 1 of the edging, which involves chaining 7. And those 7 chains count as our first double crochet of this row, as well as our first chain 4 space. Next, we're going to work what is essentially a V stitch from our skirt in this marked stitch here. So that begins with 1 double crochet here, and then chain 4, and then another double crochet in the same marked stitch. So that should look sort of familiar. And we're getting ready to work a row of shell stitches soon. So after I've completed that double crochet, I need to chain 4, and then I'm going to skip 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So once again, we're working into the 6th stitch from our middle here. And there I'm going to place a double crochet. So if you think about what we did at the beginning there, our chain 3, well, our chain 7, the chain 3 part of the chain 7 counted as our first double crochet. So we've kind of created a mirrored image here. And now I need to just skip 1 stitch. So we're still working along this bottom foundation row here. I'm going to skip the next stitch here. And then from here, I need to just slip stitch into the next stitch. So I just pull up a loop of yarn and pull my yarn through. So that's 1, and we need to slip stitch 2. So now I'm going to go to the next stitch, insert my hook, grab the yarn, and pull it through. So the purpose of those slip stitches at the end are to move our working yarn over a little so that we can extend our sleeve for the next row. Now we're going to turn our work so the right side should be facing, and we're going to begin row 2 with a chain 4. So you'll see a lot of similar components to the skirt used in this sleeve now. So we've chained 4, and we're going to single crochet in our first loop. So that's our first chain loop right here. And then we need to work a shell, like the clusters we worked previously in the skirt, here in this V-stitch. So if you remember, that is 4 double crochets, and then a chain 2, and then 4 more double crochets. There's my 4, chain 2, and then 4 more double crochets. Next, quite similarly to what we did in the skirt, we're going to single crochet to tack down our shell here. And then we need to chain 4. And now the pattern says to skip 2 stitches on the foundation row past where row 1 was attached. So if you think, here's my yarn from attaching row 1, And we can see where that chain began. It's in this stitch here. So we need to skip the next 2 stitches working up the row. So we've got 1 here and 1 here, and then we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch. So it's technically the 3rd stitch from where row 1 was attached. And I'm just going to slip stitch there, and then we need to do 1 more slip stitch to move our yarn to where we need to begin row 3. So this is what our sleeve is looking like so far. It should be fairly symmetrical, and when we block it, we can make it even more symmetrical. So let's move on to row 3. We're going to turn our work again and begin with a chain 4. And next we need to work a single crochet, chain 4, single crochet in our first loop. So we're going to single crochet and then 1, 2, 3, 4, chain 4, and then single crochet in that first chain 4 loop. So this is essentially another V-stitch. Next, we need to chain 4 and then single crochet in that chain 2 space. So that's the top of the shell. And then once again, we're going to chain 4 and then repeat what we did over here in our chain 4 loop. So that's a single crochet, a chain 4, and another single crochet. From there, we need to chain 4 more and skip 2 stitches along the foundation row. So once again, I can see where we connected and did our last slip stitch on the last time we were on the side. So it was right here. So I'm going to skip 1, 2, and then slip stitch into the 3rd stitch there with 1 slip stitch and then a 2nd slip stitch. So now you can see we have a V-loop here. It's just made with single crochets, and then another V-loop here. And just as it has been, this is going to be worked symmetrically from here out. Again, if you have the PDF, you can reference the stitch chart for this because it really sort of simplifies all of this into just a few visual components. For row 4, we're going to turn our work. So again, we're working on the right side. We can see more of the texture of the sleeve here. And I'm going to chain 4. And then we need to single crochet in our first chain loop. So that's this first space here that we come upon. So I'm going to single crochet there. And then this row is going to be our last row of shells. So in this in this V loop here, we're going to place 4 double crochets and then a chain 2 and then 4 more double crochets. Once that shell is complete, we need to single crochet in the next chain loop. So that's this next space right here. We're tacking down our shell just like we have before. And then I'm going to chain 4 and single crochet in the next chain loop. So that's right here. And now we're ready to do another shell. So again, that's 4 double crochets, chain 2, and 4 more double crochets, all in the same V loop. And then once that's complete, we're going to tack down that shell. It's hard to see the next chain loop here, but it's actually right here, right next to our shell. So I'm going to single crochet in there, and then we need 4 more chains. If at any point you're lost in the sleeve, you can look at the beginning of a row, and that kind of gives you a hint to how the row should end, because like I mentioned, it's all going to be symmetrical. So from here, we need to skip 2 stitches along the foundation row. So I can see my yarn was attached last right here, so I'm going to skip 1 and 2, and then slip stitch into the 3rd stitch here, and then do 1 more slip stitch. Okay, now I'm going to turn my work for row 5. We're on the wrong side now, and this begins with 4 chains again. And we're going to single crochet in the first chain loop, so that's right here. And then next we need to chain 4 and then just single crochet in this chain 2 space. So that's the top of the shell. And then we're going to chain 4 again. And And then next we're going to single crochet in this chain loop right here. And then we're just repeating that. So that is a chain 4, single crochet in the top of the shell, chain 4, single crochet in the chain loop. And then to end it, we just need to chain 4. And like we have been, we're going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2 along the foundation row, and then slip stitch 2 into the next 2 stitches. So 1 slip stitch and 2, oops, and 2 slip stitches. So now when you turn your work for row 6, it should be looking like this. We should have a total of 6 chain 4 loops at the very top here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And that's going to be the foundation of these last couple rows, which are only going to be chain 4 lace spaces. So I'll show you how to work row 6, and then you'll just repeat the same thing for a few more rows. So now our right side is facing, and I'm going to chain 4, and then we're going to single crochet in the next chain loop. That's like that. And now the pattern says to do that 6 times. So I'm going to do the exact same thing 6 times. Chain 4, and then single crochet in the next chain 4 loop. So that's a chain 4. Here's my next chain loop. I'm going to single crochet in there. And then I'm just going to repeat like that across. So there's 4 chains, single crochet in the next chain 4 space. So let's do that for a total of 6 times. And once you've done that, you can tell that you've done 6 of them because you should have 6 chain 4 loops. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now the pattern is telling us to just chain 4. So in this row, we have 7 total chain 4 loops, and in each subsequent row, it's going to grow by 1. So here we have 7, the next row it's going to be 8, the next row it's going to be 9. So we can skip 2 stitches along the foundation row here, and then slip stitch into the next stitch, and slip stitch 1 more. And after that, you're just going to repeat that same row a few more times, only it's going to grow by 1 set of chain 4 each time. So that's going to proceed this way, creating that nice lace, and you're going to work it a few more rows if you're making one of the smaller sizes, and a few more after that if you're making one of the larger sizes. So go ahead and work those, and then repeat the exact same steps to make a second sleeve. And once your sleeve is complete, you're going to want to go ahead and block it before you sew it to your dress, because it's going to be a lot easier to open up this lace when it's not actually attached to your dress yet. So to block it, we're going to put some straight pins just gently in these points right here. So pull it down just slightly, and then you can use the steam setting on your iron, or if you have a steamer, and then gently blow steam over the entire piece, taking care not to touch the iron or the steamer to the actual sleeve, because it could melt your yarn, especially if your yarn is acrylic. You're just going to blow steam gently over the whole piece. You'll see this sort of relax and open up, and then we'll be ready to sew on the sleeves. To get ready to seam our sleeve on here, I've turned my dress inside out. So we have the wrong side facing here and the wrong side of the sleeve facing. So this is just like when we seamed our side seams. And the way that we know it's the wrong side, just to review here, is those bumpy rows from the single crochet, double crochet rows, they're facing inside now. So you can see that pretty texture, that's on the inside, and same with the sleeve. That's on the inside here, and you can also look at the shells of your sleeve right here and make sure that you're looking at the wrong side of double crochets there. So once you've got that sorted out, go ahead and use stitch markers or safety pins to pin your sleeve in place. Now, one thing that's important here, because we don't have visual rows that we're lining up the way we did on the side seams, we're just gonna fold this sleeve in half, and then make sure that that halfway juncture is in line with the seam up at the shoulder. So now I have my strand of yarn in my tapestry needle here, and one thing that I like to do, once again to avoid having to weave in another yarn tail, is to sort of pre-weave it in. So what I do is pull my yarn through as if I was weaving in a tail, but just pull it until there's just a little hanging out here, and then go back and forth a few times. So basically I've woven in the end where I'm going to start sewing, and I don't have to rethread the needle and do it again later. So I've done that here, and now I'm going to start seaming from this edge, this corner here, using the mattress stitch, and I'm going to go from here in the arm inset, and then up around the shoulder, over the shoulder, and then back the other way, and then I'm going to end at the inset, the edge of the inset down here on the other side. So just like we did with the side seam, we're going to use the mattress stitch, which is essentially going back and forth, over, up, over, up. So if you need a refresher on that, go back to the video where we seamed the two bodice pieces, and then you will have yourself a dress or a top with sleeves. To get started with our flutter sleeve, we're going to actually work directly into the raw edge of these bodice rows here. So I've marked the third row up from the armpit inset right here. So the row that you should mark is indicated in the written pattern, how many rows you're skipping right here, but everyone's going to be marking one of the double crochet rows. So if we look at these visually, we sort of see a smooth row right here, and then a bumpy row, and then a smooth row. And the smooth rows were double crochets, and then the bumpy rows are the ones where we did single crochet, double crochet, and alternated those. So we're all going to mark a smooth row to get started. I'm working into the third row for this, so I've skipped 1, 2, 3, and we're going to actually work into the row with a marker, so it's helpful to just set it off the edge just a little bit so that you can work into that stitch right there. So to get started, I am going to make sure that the right side of my dress is facing, so that just means that it's not inside out. And that also means that on one side of the dress, you're going to start on the front of it, and on the other side, you're going to start on the back of it, because you need to work in the direction you normally crochet. So I'm going to work into my marked row here, and I'm going to just refer to these as smooth rows and bumpy rows. And when I'm doing that, I'm talking about just working into the final stitch of that row. So sometimes it's the first stitch, sometimes it's a chain 3, but I'm going to attach my yarn right here, whoops, in that first marked stitch. And then this is going to be a row of double crochets. So I'm going to chain 3 at the beginning of this row, and that's going to count as my first double crochet. I tend to like to just crochet over these yarn tails as I go, so I don't have to weave them in. So I'm just going to hold it right there underneath. And from here, I'm going to work another double crochet into that first space that is the smooth row, the edge of the smooth row. So I've got now 2 double crochets in there, a chain 3 and a first double crochet. And the frequency we're going to work at here is 2 double crochets in the edge of every smooth row, and then 1 double crochet in the edge of every bumpy row. So 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So we've got 2 there. I'm going to place 1 right in the edge of this bumpy row. Doing it this way ensures that we have just about the right number of stitches to have this lay flat, because we're not ready for it to flutter quite yet. So I'm continuing along here. I'm in the edge of a double crochet, a smooth row here. So I'm going to place 2 stitches. And then next comes a bumpy row. So I'm just going to do 1 double crochet. So go ahead and pause the video and work all of your stitches over to the stitch marker on the opposite side of the dress. And one thing to note here is that when you get to the shoulder seam, you're going to come upon 2 bumpy rows in a row. So you just continue with the same sort of code I've taught you already, which is a double crochet in each bumpy row. So at the shoulder, you're just going to do 1 double crochet in the first bumpy row, 1 double crochet in the second bumpy row, and then proceed with 2 double crochets in the next smooth row. So as I come upon the marker on the opposite side, now I'm going to place 2 double crochets in that row because it's a smooth double crochet row. And then I'm going to slip stitch into the side here, which is a bumpy row. So we're all going to slip stitch in a bumpy row regardless of what size you're making. And that's just going to attach this sleeve to the edge here. So I'm slip stitching there. And now this row is finished. So I can turn my work And now typically we would begin a row of single crochet, double crochet with a chain 1, but in this case we're not going to do that. So we're just going to single crochet and double crochet into the first stitch without chaining 1. So we've got a single crochet and a double crochet. And then if you remember in the bodice, we were always skipping a stitch before we did that again. Now we're not going to skip a stitch because we want to increase the number of stitches here to create that flutter. So instead of skipping, I'm going to work a single crochet and a double crochet in each stitch all the way around to the other side. So we're effectively doubling the number of stitches that we have in our sleeve. And at the end of the row here, we just have our chain 3 from last row here. So I'm going to single crochet in that, which is just how we ended our rows previously when we did the single crochet, double crochet rows. And now I'm going to slip stitch into the side edge here, and that's the raw edge of a bumpy row. So I'm going to slip stitch there, and then I need to move my yarn a little further along the sleeve edge. So I'm going to slip stitch 2 more times. That's in the bumpy one. And now I'm going to slip stitch in the edge of the double crochet smooth row twice. So that's once and twice. And then from there, this row is complete and we can move on to row 3. So when we do that, we're going to turn. It's going to have the right side facing again. And now you may need to tighten that down a little bit. Now we're not going to chain just like we did before. We're going to just start off with a double crochet, and we're going to double crochet in each stitch now all the way to the end. So we're not increasing any stitches now. We're just working in all the increases we made in the last round. So let's go ahead and double crochet in each stitch. And at the end of row 3 here, we have 1 more single crochet to work, and because we didn't chain 1, it's kind of sort of slanted down here. So it's this one that's right here by the edge. So I'm going to double crochet in there, and then I'm going to join my yarn with a slip stitch, not in this bumpy row because we've already slip stitched into there. So I'm going to slip stitch into the smooth row, which is the double crochet row. And then I'm going to slip stitch once more just to move my yarn a little bit. And none of this you really have to get exactly perfect. It's going to look fluttery and beautiful even if you miss a stitch. But I'm just kind of explaining the way the pattern is written. So from here we're going to work our 1 more bumpy row. And to do that, I'm turning my work so the wrong side facing now, and then this is just like we did in the bodice pattern, except for we're not going to chain 1. So again, I'm just going to single crochet in the first stitch and then double crochet in that same stitch. And now we are going to skip 1 stitch in between. So just like in the bodice, we're going to do single crochet, double crochet, skip a stitch, and then single, double in the next stitch. And so I'm going to skip 1 and then single, double in the next one, and we're just going to repeat just like that to the end of the row. And then once I've worked in every stitch, I'm just going to slip stitch into the next bumpy raw edge. And that for me, because I'm making one of the smaller sizes here, is actually sort of at the bottom of the armpit inset. What's more important is that you get this tacked down, not exactly where it goes. So now we've completed the sleeve. If you want yours to have even more volume, you can continue to repeat those last 2 rows, which would be doing now a double crochet in each stitch and then alternating that with a regular single crochet, double crochet in 1 stitch, skip a stitch, single crochet, double crochet in the next stitch. So go ahead and do as many rows as you would like. I think in the smaller child sizes, this is totally adequate. But if you like volume and drama, then go ahead and keep going. All right, so we have one last finishing touch on our dresses or tops, and that is to create a simple edging around the neckline just to clean it up a little bit. So I have my yarn here and it's got a slip knot on the hook, so I'm just going to attach it in one of the shoulder seams, right where those 2 bumpy rows joined. And I like to attach my yarn by just pulling through that slip knot and then tightening it down, and then I have my yarn attached. So from here, we're gonna do something called a crab stitch, which is also known as reverse single crochet. And it's a little funny because we're just gonna be actually working, instead of working in the direction you typically crochet. So for me, because I'm right-handed, that is from right to left. We're gonna actually work from the left to the right. It's a little bit backwards, but it's just as easy as a single crochet stitch. So you may see some tails as I work here. Those are just yarn tails that I lazily do not want to have to weave in, so I'm just going to work over them as I go. And to do the reverse single crochet, I'm going to chain one, and then I'm going to work in the opposite direction I usually do, inserting my hook. Then I'm going to yarn over just like I would with a single crochet, pull up, so now I have 2 loops on my hook, just like with a typical single crochet, except for they're a little twisted. And then I yarn over and pull through. So that's my first reverse single crochet or crab stitch. Now I go into the next space. So because we're not working in exact stitches here, we're just trying to work evenly along this edge of neckline decreases. So for you, that will probably mean putting 1 to 2 stitches in each of these raw edge rows. So I'm going to work in the next space. I can insert my hook here, come around, yarn over, pull it up. Now I have 2 loops on my hook. They're a little bit twisted, which is what they should be, and then yarn over and pull through. So then I'm going to do another stitch, insert my hook, yarn over, pull them up. They're a little twisted, yarn over and pull through. So more than the frequency of stitches here, the important thing is just to try to get the edge line, the edging, to look sort of even and lay just sort of flat so that you don't notice it too much. So I'm just going to continue around like this. When I'm working into a raw edge, I'm just placing my stitches evenly. Once I get around to down here at the bottom of the neck where I can see actual stitches, I'm just going to place 1 reverse single crochet in each stitch. So let's do a few more of those together. I'm inserting my hook behind in the opposite direction I normally crochet, yarning over and pulling up, and then yarning through both loops on my hook. It's kind of fun, I think, to stretch your brain like this because it's so backwards from how you usually crochet. So we're going to continue just like this all the way around. When you get back to the very first stitch, you can slip stitch to join it, and then our edging will be done. All right, we're back at the end of our round here, so I'm gonna go ahead and slip stitch into my first single crochet, and that joins the round. So I can fasten off right there, and you can see this makes a really pretty, almost rope looking edging that just makes everything look a little cleaner and more finished on your dress or top. Oh my gosh, we're getting so close to the end. All that's left now is to weave in any remaining ends that you have, and then go ahead and block your entire top or dress to open up all the beautiful stitches that you've worked so hard on. And when you're doing your final blocking, just take care to focus on a few of these seams that are a little bit bulkier. So like your sleeve seam here and your side seam, those really are some of the only seams we have. But your garment will be turned right side out. And when you do that, then just kind of make sure that you're steaming this section, giving a little extra attention because that'll help that lay as flat as possible. Okay, you fancy dressmaker, your Idlewild dress is officially complete. I'm really loving watching your dresses come together on Instagram, so even if you're finishing yours long after this crochet along is over, please share a picture, tag me at MakeandDoCrew, and use the hashtag IdlewildDress so that we can all see this huge accomplishment of yours. If you found these videos helpful, I would love it if you left me a comment below with what you found the most useful, because I'm always trying to improve my tutorials for you. And please be sure to sign up for my weekly emails where I send out more free crochet patterns and tutorials just like this. Until next time, happy crocheting!